The penthouse air smelled of Windex, lemon polish, and Marcus's quiet rage. It was a sterile, cold scent that clung to the floor-to-ceiling glass and the chrome legs of the furniture. For Amara, it mostly smelled like survival. From 37 floors above Chicago, the city's roar was a distant, muted thing, a life she could see but not hear, a world she no longer belonged to. She ran a hand over the smooth, cool marble of the kitchen island, her reflection a distorted ghost in the polished surface. Her skin, the color of rich mahogany, seemed to absorb the cold light of the room. Her hair was pulled back into a severe bun, a style Marcus preferred because he said it looked less wild, more professional. The uniform of her life was no longer a diplomatic attaché's tailored suit, but the silent, elegant sheath dresses he bought for her, clothes that were both a cage and a price tag. Her hands, once busy signing memoranda and shaking the hands of foreign dignitaries, now only adjusted table settings and smoothed non-existent creases from her dress. But her eyes, dark and watchful, missed nothing. They were the last part of the old Amara, the part she kept hidden behind a carefully constructed mask of placid obedience. She was tolerating this life for one reason: David. Her brilliant, kind younger brother, now in his second year of medical school at Johns Hopkins. The tuition, the board, the endless fees, it all amounted to $87,450 a year. A number seared into her brain, a number that was the exact measure of her gilded cage. Marcus paid it without a second thought, a casual display of power that was both a gift and a shackle. Every time she thought of leaving, of the feel of his fingers bruising her wrist, or the venom in his whispered threats, the image of David's hopeful face, the future she was buying for him, froze her in place. This wasn't weakness. It was a sacrifice, a calculated, agonizing trade. A quiet chime announced the arrival of the private elevator. Her body went rigid, a familiar Pavlovian response. She smoothed her dress again, a nervous tic she hated, and composed her face into the neutral mask he expected. Marcus Thorne strode into the room, a whirlwind of expensive cologne and restless energy. He was handsome in the way of a magazine ad, all sharp angles and predatory confidence. He tossed a sleek leather briefcase onto a white leather sofa. It landed with a heavy thud that made her flinch. "The investors from Seoul are on their way up," he announced, not looking at her. He was already loosening his tie, his focus on the city lights beyond the glass. "Chairman Park himself is coming. This is the big one, Amara. The Sun Hua Group deal. Don't screw it up." "Of course not, Marcus." Her voice was a soft, deferential murmur, a sound she had perfected. He finally turned to her, his eyes scanning her from head to toe. It wasn't a loving gaze. It was an inspection, an assessment of his property. "Good," he said. "Remember the rules. You smile, you pour the drinks, you don't talk about your old job, you don't talk about anything, really. You're just here to look good. A beautiful, silent accessory, understood?" "Yes, Marcus." He walked over to the bar, pouring himself a scotch. On the island, a stack of papers from his briefcase lay askew. It was the Sun Hua proposal. Glancing at it, her mind, sharp and hungry for the complex analysis it had been denied for 2 years, snagged on a column of figures. A currency conversion error, a simple mistake, but one that undervalued his company's primary asset by nearly 8%. A fatal flaw in a negotiation with a notoriously meticulous man like Chairman Park. The old Amara, the woman who had negotiated trade deals in that very city, would have pointed it out, would have drafted a correction, would have saved him from himself. This Amara, the wife, the accessory, remained perfectly still. She watched him take a sip of his scotch, the picture of a man in control, and she said nothing. Her silence was a weapon he couldn't see. Her dignity was in the things she withheld. She let the error sit there, a quiet time bomb on the marble countertop. The elevator chimed again. Marcus straightened his tie, his face transforming, the casual cruelty dissolving into a mask of professional charm. "Showtime," he whispered, and the sound was more of a threat than an encouragement. She forced a smile as the doors opened to reveal 3 men. 2 were younger, in sharp suits, their faces impassive. The man in the center was older, with a mane of silver hair and eyes that seemed to hold the weight of decades. Chairman Park. His gaze swept the room, dismissive of the opulence, until it landed on Amara. For a fraction of a second, a flicker of something. Confusion, recognition, crossed his face before it was gone. She gave a slight, respectful bow, a gesture her body remembered, even if her life had forgotten its context. That evening was a slow-motion nightmare. Marcus was a peacock, preening and posturing, his voice too loud, his gestures too broad. He was trying to dominate the room, unaware that with men like Chairman Park, power was expressed through stillness and silence. Amara moved like a phantom, refilling glasses, offering canapes, her smile painted on. She listened to Marcus butcher the honorifics, watched him misread every subtle social cue. He was losing the deal and was too arrogant to see it. Chairman Park barely touched his food. He spoke little, his questions sharp and precise. He addressed them mostly to Marcus, but his eyes often drifted to Amara, a silent, unsettling assessment. It was as if he were trying to solve a puzzle. Later, as the disastrous meeting wound down, Marcus cornered her in the kitchen while the guests were in the living room. His fingers dug into her upper arm, his nails pinching. The smile was gone, replaced by a cold fury. "You're not trying hard enough," he hissed, his face inches from hers. "He's not biting. I need you to be more charming." "Marcus, you're hurting me." "I'll do more than hurt you if I lose this deal," he breathed, the smell of scotch on his breath. "I'll cancel the wire transfer for David's tuition tomorrow. Do you understand me? I'll call the dean myself and tell them there's been a mistake, that his sponsor has pulled his funding." Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through her practiced composure. It was his favorite weapon, the one he knew she couldn't fight. "Please don't," she whispered, the words tasting like ash. "Then go out there and be the charming wife I paid for." He released her, shoving her slightly toward the door. She stumbled, catching herself on the counter. On her arm, the distinct shape of his fingers was already beginning to bloom into a dark bruise. She walked back into the living room, her smile locked in place, her soul screaming. What she didn't know was that the real humiliation, the one that would shatter everything, was still to come. The night was far from over. The deal was dead. She knew it the moment Chairman Park stood, offering a stiff, formal bow that was a clear dismissal. Marcus walked them to the elevator, his face a thunderous mask of forced civility. The second the elevator doors closed, he turned on her. The slap was so fast she didn't see it coming. The sound of it, sharp and ugly, echoed in the cavernous silence of the penthouse. Her head snapped to the side, her cheek stinging, her ear ringing. "This is your fault," he snarled, advancing on her. "You and your sullen, silent act. You embarrassed me. You think you're still so smart, don't you? That you're better than this?" She backed away, her hands coming up to shield her face. "Marcus, please." "Please what?" He grabbed her by the shoulders, shaking her hard. Her head knocked against the wall. "Please don't remind you that you're nothing without me, that your brother is in med school on my charity. You are here because I allow you to be here." He dragged her through the apartment, his grip like iron. He threw her into their bedroom, the door slamming shut behind her. She heard the sickening click of the lock. Panic seized her, cold and absolute. He had never locked her in before. She scrambled to the door, pounding on the solid wood. "Marcus, let me out!" His voice came from the other side, muffled but dripping with menace. "You're going to stay in there and think about what you've done. You need to learn some gratitude." She could hear him moving around the apartment, the sound of glass smashing, his rage finding its outlet. This was different. This was an escalation. A line had been crossed. The air grew thick with a terrifying premonition. He was getting drunk. He was enraged, and she was locked in here with him. Her breath hitched in a sob. Her sister, Nia. She needed to call Nia. Her hands trembled as she fumbled for the phone on the bedside table. Her fingers felt clumsy, thick. She swiped through her contacts, her vision blurred by tears. She found Nia's name and started typing, her thumbs flying across the screen, a desperate torrent of fear. "He locked me in. He's breaking things. I think this is it. He's going to kill me. I'm so sorry." She hit send, a wave of desperate relief washing over her. The message was out. Someone knew. She waited for Nia's frantic reply, for the 3 dots to appear, but they didn't. The screen remained blank. A minute passed. 2. A cold dread began to seep into her bones, colder even than her fear of Marcus. She looked at the message thread. The contact picture wasn't Nia's smiling face. It was a blank gray silhouette, Wrong number. In her panic, her trembling fingers had clicked on the number right below her sister's. A number she didn't recognize. An old contact, maybe? A wrong number saved by mistake years ago? It didn't matter. Her lifeline, her desperate scream for help, had been sent into the void. A sob of pure despair escaped her. She was alone. Utterly, completely alone. She sank to the floor, her back against the door, pulling her knees to her chest. Outside, Marcus's rampage had gone quiet. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. It was the silence of a predator gathering itself to strike. Her phone buzzed in her hand. She stared at it, her heart hammering against her ribs. A reply from the wrong number. She held her breath, expecting a "Who is this?" or "Wrong number, sorry." But the message on the screen was a single word. Stark, cold, demanding. Where? For 10 seconds she said nothing. 10 seconds where the world seemed to stop spinning. 10 seconds where she weighed the certainty of the monster outside her door against the terrifying uncertainty of the stranger on her phone. 10 seconds where she decided. Survival. Her fingers, no longer trembling, moved with a sudden icy precision. She typed the address of the penthouse, then she added 2 more words. Top floor. She hit send. And then she waited, her eyes fixed on the locked door, her body a coiled spring of terror and a strange, unfamiliar sliver of hope. The silence in the apartment stretched on, a taut wire about to snap. The next person to come through the door would decide her fate. The sound was not the furious rattling of a key in the lock she expected. It was a soft, metallic click from the front of the penthouse, followed by the whisper of the main door opening and closing. Then, silence. Not the menacing silence of Marcus, but a heavy, weighted silence. The silence of presence. Amara held her breath. She pushed herself into a corner of the room, away from the door, making herself as small as possible. Footsteps, plural. Not Marcus's angry, heavy tread. These were quiet, measured, confident. They moved through the living room, a soft sweep of a space being assessed. A sharp, brutal noise shattered the quiet. A choked cry of surprise from Marcus, cut off abruptly. A heavy thud. And then the weighted silence returned, deeper than before. Her bedroom door handle jiggled, but instead of a key, there was a quiet whirring sound, and then a solid thunk as the lock disengaged. The door swung inward. 2 men stood in the doorway. They were dressed in identical, impeccably tailored black suits, their faces impassive, their posture radiating a calm, professional menace. They were not police. They were something else entirely. One of them held a device in his hand, a sophisticated lock-picking tool. He met her gaze, gave a short, almost imperceptible nod, and then stepped aside. Behind them, a third man entered the room. He moved with an unnerving stillness, a predatory grace that seemed to absorb the light around him. He wasn't large, but he commanded the space absolutely. He was Korean, his features sharp and intelligent, his black hair styled with precision. He wore a dark gray suit that probably cost more than David's first semester of tuition. A platinum watch gleamed on his wrist, a subtle testament to a level of wealth that made Marcus's seem like a child's allowance. But it was his eyes that held her. They were cold, calculating, and utterly devoid of emotion as they swept over her, taking in her disheveled state, the terror on her face, the faint red mark on her cheek. They were the eyes of a man who saw the world as a series of threats to be neutralized. This was Kwon Ji-hoon. She didn't know his name, but she knew his type. She had met men like him in her old life, men who moved in the shadows of power, whose influence was felt but rarely seen. He did not speak to her. He turned his head slightly, his voice a low, quiet command to one of his men. "Sweep the apartment, secure all electronics, and deal with the trash in the living room." The man nodded and disappeared. The other remained, a silent statue by the door. Ji-hoon's gaze returned to her. He took a step into the room. She flinched, pressing herself further into the wall. He stopped. He wasn't offering comfort or pity. This was an assessment, a transaction. "You sent the text," he stated. It was not a question. His English was perfect, with no discernible accent. She could only nod, her throat too tight to speak. "He is Marcus Thorne, CEO of Thorne Industries." Again, a statement. He had already done his research. She nodded again. "Why would he want you dead?" His voice was cold as steel, demanding facts, not feelings. The question broke her paralysis. The deal, she whispered, her voice hoarse. He lost the deal with Sun Hua Group. He blamed me. A flicker of something, not surprise, but interest in his cold eyes. You know of Sun Hua? I used to work at the State Department as a diplomatic translator and cultural attaché. I specialized in Korean corporate negotiations. The words felt strange, like a language she hadn't spoken in years. Now, for the first time, his mask shifted. His eyes narrowed slightly. He was re-evaluating her. She was no longer just a battered wife. She was an asset, an anomaly. Come, he said, the single word, an undeniable command. He turned and walked out of the room. She hesitated for a second, then forced her trembling legs to obey. She followed him into the living room. Marcus was on the floor, unconscious, his wrists and ankles secured with thick zip ties. The man who had been tasked with dealing with the trash stood over him, impassively. The apartment was being quietly, efficiently dismantled. Laptops, phones, tablets, all were being placed into silver, padded cases. Ji-hoon led her to the elevator without a backward glance. As the doors slid shut, sealing her away from the wreckage of her life, she finally found her voice. "Who are you?" He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "I'm the wrong number." He took her to a place that was the antithesis of the penthouse, a sleek minimalist apartment in a nondescript building that hummed with the quiet thrum of high-level security. There was no art on the walls, just clean lines and dark wood. He showed her to a room. "Rest," he commanded. "We will talk in the morning." She didn't sleep. She sat on the edge of the bed, the adrenaline slowly draining away, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion and a terrifying, yawning uncertainty. She had escaped Marcus, but she had no idea what she had just stepped into. She had traded one cage for another, perhaps one far more dangerous. The next day, the alliance was forged not in a moment of gratitude, but in the crucible of a business meeting. Ji-hoon brought her to a stark, private conference room. Waiting at the head of the table was Chairman Park. The old man's eyes widened in genuine shock when he saw her. He stood, a gesture of respect that stunned her. "Ms. Davis," he said, his voice laced with disbelief. "Amara Davis. I remember you. From the Semiconductor Summit in Busan 5 years ago. You were with the Undersecretary of Commerce. You were formidable." Ji-hoon's head tilted slightly. He watched the exchange, his mind clearly putting pieces together. Before Amara could respond, the door opened and Marcus was shoved into the room, flanked by 2 of Ji-hoon's men. He was pale, his suit rumpled, a new kind of fear in his eyes. He saw Chairman Park and a desperate, craven hope flickered on his face. "Chairman Park, thank God," he began, his voice shaky. "There's been a terrible misunderstanding. My wife, she's unwell. These men..." He was trying to reassert control, to paint her as hysterical, unreliable. It was his last desperate play. And it was the moment Amara chose. She straightened her back. The deferential slump she had carried for 2 years vanished. She squared her shoulders. She lifted her chin. She looked directly at Marcus, and for the first time, she let him see the woman he had tried to bury. "Marcus," her voice was calm, measured, and utterly devoid of fear. "You made a currency conversion error in the Q3 logistics projections for Sun Hua. You undervalued your asset distribution channels by 7.8%. That's why the chairman walked away. Not because of me, because you are incompetent." Marcus froze, his mouth hanging open. The color drained from his face. She then turned to Chairman Park, a ghost of her former professional self returning. She switched to flawless Korean, her tone formal, her vocabulary precise, using the Busan dialect she knew he favored. "Chairman Park, my husband's company is a house of cards built on inflated valuations and shoddy data security. He is not a worthy partner for Sun Hua. However, the technology he stole to build it has potential, if placed in the right hands." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a power dynamic shattering and rearranging itself in real time. Marcus stared at her as if she were a stranger, an alien. Chairman Park was leaning forward, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his face. But Amara's eyes were on Ji-hoon. He was watching her, his face still a mask, but his eyes held a new light. It was not kindness, it was recognition, the recognition of a fellow predator. Later, after Marcus had been taken away, Ji-hoon found her staring out the window of the conference room. "He underestimated you," Ji-hoon said, standing beside her. "Everyone does," she replied, her voice quiet but hard as diamond. "It's my greatest strength." "Chairman Park is my uncle," he said. "Sun Hua is part of my family's enterprise." Marcus Thorne was not just an incompetent businessman. He was a threat to our interests. It clicked into place. This wasn't a rescue. It was a convergence of interests. "I want him ruined," Amara said, her voice deadly quiet. "Not just his business, everything. I want him to have nothing." "We can provide the infrastructure for that," Ji-hoon replied. "The resources, the protection." "Good," she said, turning to face him fully. "Because I can provide the strategy. I know where every single one of his digital bodies are buried, and I'm going to dig them all up." It was not an offer of help. It was not a plea for protection. It was a trade, a negotiation between equals. And in the cold, calculating depths of Kwon Ji-hoon's eyes, she saw that the deal had been accepted. The war began in silence. Ji-hoon provided her with a command center that looked like it belonged in a spy film. A sterile room, deep in the sublevels of one of his corporate holdings, filled with a bank of monitors, encrypted servers, and a direct, untraceable satellite link. He gave her a small team of his best analysts, stone-faced men and women who spoke in clipped technical jargon and treated her with a deferential respect that was both jarring and empowering. They were his resources. She was the weapon. Amara shed the skin of Marcus's wife and stepped back into the woman she had been, but sharper now, honed by pain and forged in fury. She worked with a relentless, obsessive focus. The years of forced dormancy had made her mind a caged animal, and now it was free. She tore through Thorne Industries' firewalls, not with brute force, but with elegant precision. She knew Marcus's mind, his vanities, his passwords, the name of his first dog, the birthday of the college girlfriend he'd never gotten over. She moved through his digital life like a ghost, unseen, unheard. What she found was worse than she had imagined. The financial fraud was just the surface. Marcus was trafficking in data. He had been selling the private information of his app's millions of users, financial records, medical histories, private messages, to black market bidders and rogue political factions. He wasn't just a cheat and an abuser. He was a parasite feeding on the lives of innocent people. The discovery shifted her mission from personal revenge to a cold, righteous crusade. This made him a direct threat to Ji-hoon's world, where discretion was paramount and uncontrolled chaos was the enemy. One night, working late, she uncovered a series of encrypted transactions leading to an off-site server farm in a nondescript warehouse in Gary, Indiana. It was a ghost server, not on any official company inventory. The mother lode. "My team can handle it," Ji-hoon said, his voice coming through the secure line. He was a constant, invisible presence, monitoring her progress. "No," Amara countered, her eyes not leaving the screen. "They'll look for a brute force attack, a team of men in black suits. He'll have security watching for that. But he won't be watching for a lone woman with a clipboard and a confident smile." This was her first challenge to his authority, a beat of silence on the line. She was overruling him. "It's too risky," he said. His tone was flat, but it was the closest he came to expressing concern. "The greatest risk is being predictable," she replied, quoting a maxim from one of her old intelligence briefings. "I know how to do this. I spent years getting diplomats and their attachés through checkpoints they weren't supposed to cross. Getting into a data center is easy." Another silence. Then, "A car will be ready in an hour. You will wear a tracker. You will not be out of communication for more than 5 minutes. These are not negotiable." She allowed herself a small, grim smile. "Understood." Her solo operation was a masterpiece of social engineering. Dressed in a janitorial uniform she'd procured, carrying a bucket and a clipboard with a forged work order, she walked into the server farm. She chatted with the bored night shift security guard about the terrible weather, complained about her supervisor, and got buzzed through the first door without a second glance. She was invisible again, but this time, her invisibility was a weapon of her own choosing. Inside, she moved with calm purpose, planting a small, powerful data cloning device onto the main server rack. It was an in-and-out job, over in less than 15 minutes. She was back in the car, speeding away before the guard had even finished his lukewarm coffee. As the data streamed into her secure server, she felt a thrill of cold, clean triumph. This was who she was. Not a victim, a professional. But Marcus was not idle. Realizing she was gone and that his digital world was being breached, he grew desperate. He did the one thing she feared most. He called her brother. Ji-hoon's voice was dead calm when he patched her into the call. He's escalating. He's targeting your family. She listened as Marcus's voice, slick with poison, threatened David. He told him Amara had run off, that she was mentally unstable, and that unless David could convince her to come back, the tuition funding would stop. Then the threat turned darker. A hint of legal trouble, of a drug charge that could appear out of nowhere. Panic, hot and familiar, flared in her chest. Ji-hoon's voice cut through it. "My men are 2 minutes from his dorm. We can move him to a secure location now." "No," Amara said, her mind racing. "Don't move him. If he disappears, Marcus will know we have him. He'll panic, destroy evidence. Keep your men on surveillance, invisible. I'll handle David." She was modifying the plan again, trusting her instincts over his protocols. She called her brother. Her voice was a calm, steady anchor in his sea of confusion and fear. She didn't tell him everything, but she told him enough. That she was safe, that she was handling a difficult situation, that he needed to trust her, act normal, and not respond to Marcus. She promised him she would fix everything. It was a promise she intended to keep. The final piece of the puzzle came from the data she'd stolen from the Ghost server. It was an encrypted ledger, but the encryption was a type she recognized, a defunct diplomatic cipher the State Department had briefly used a decade ago. It was arrogant, a show of Marcus's supposed cleverness. For her, it was a key. As she decrypted the files, a name appeared over and over again. A shell corporation funneling money to a rival faction within Ji-hoon's own organization. Marcus wasn't just selling data. He was financing a coup against Ji-hoon's uncle, Chairman Park. Suddenly, a red alert flashed on one of her screens, a threat warning. A sophisticated piece of malware had traced the data exfiltration back to their network. It wasn't from Marcus. It was too advanced. It was from the rival faction. They knew they'd been exposed. An alarm blared through the facility. "Compromised," one of the analysts said, his voice tight. "They're coming." Ji-hoon was on his feet, issuing quiet commands. But Amara was staring at a blueprint of the building on her screen, her mind calculating angles, escape routes. "They'll expect us to go up, to the roof for evac," she said, her voice cutting through the controlled chaos. "Or down, to the armored cars in the garage. They'll have both covered." "There is no other way out," Ji-hoon stated, moving toward her. "Yes, there is." She pointed to the screen. "The old service tunnels. They connect to the city's steam pipe network. They're not on any modern schematic. I saw them when I was reviewing the building's original plans for security vulnerabilities." She had done that on her first day. A force of habit. A habit that was about to save their lives. An explosion rocked the floor above them. The lights flickered. Ji-hoon looked at her, then at the schematic. He saw the path she had found, the one his own security team had missed. He gave a sharp, decisive nod. "Lead the way." As they moved through the dark, forgotten tunnels, the heat and hiss of the steam pipes around them, Amara was in the lead. She was not the asset. She was not the victim being protected. In that moment, she was the strategist, the operator, the one with the plan. She had just saved him, and his entire operation, from a threat he never saw coming. The debt was paid. The partnership was sealed in the dark beneath the city, not as protector and protected, but as equals. The war had escalated, and she was ready for the final battle. It was time to set her trap. The night of the gala was cold, a biting Chicago wind whipping off the lake. It was the launch party for Marcus's biggest venture yet. The announcement of his merger with a subsidiary of the Sun Hua Group. It was, of course, a fiction. A grand stage Amara had designed for his public execution. Ji-hoon's organization had created the subsidiary, a corporate phantom complete with a fabricated history and billion-dollar valuation, all to lure Marcus into the final checkmate. Amara stood before the mirror in the hotel suite Ji-hoon had secured. The woman looking back was a stranger. Gone were the soft, apologetic dresses of her marriage. In their place was a bespoke black pantsuit, its lines sharp and severe. Her hair was not in a bun, but fell to her shoulders in a cascade of elegant, powerful curls. Her skin glowed under the soft lights. She wore no jewelry except for a pair of simple diamond studs. Her face was a mask of calm, controlled fury. This was not Amara Thorne, the wife. This was Amara Davis, the architect of a man's destruction. Ji-hoon entered the room, a silent presence behind her. He held a small velvet box. He didn't speak. He simply opened it. Inside was an earpiece, impossibly small. "For communication," he said, and a pin, a simple, elegant design of a silver hawk. "The symbol of my family. So, my people will know who you are." It was the closest he would ever come to a declaration. It was not a gift of affection, it was a transfer of authority, a symbolic object. She took it, her fingers brushing his, and pinned it to her lapel, the acceptance of a role, an alliance, a belonging. Downstairs, the ballroom was a sea of champagne and ambition. Marcus was on stage, bathed in a spotlight, his voice booming with false confidence as he spoke of synergy and future growth. He was at the peak of his power, a king in a kingdom of fools, completely unaware that his castle was made of sand. Amara entered from the back of the ballroom. She moved with a deliberate, unhurried pace, flanked by two of Ji-hoon's most formidable men. Heads turned. A murmur rippled through the crowd. They didn't know who she was, but they recognized power when they saw it. She walked down the central aisle, her heels clicking softly on the marble floor. She did not stop until she was at the foot of the stage. She looked up at Marcus. His voice faltered. The confident smile on his face froze, then melted into a mask of pure shock. He saw her. He saw the suit, the confidence, the men flanking her. He saw the pin on her lapel. It was the mirror image of their first meeting in the penthouse, but the power dynamic had been inverted completely. She was in command now. He was the one who was trapped. "Amara," he whispered into the microphone, the sound echoing through the suddenly silent room. She didn't answer him. One of her men handed her a microphone. She took it, her hand steady. "Good evening," her voice carried, calm and clear, laced with ice. "My name is Amara Davis. For the last 2 years, I have been the wife of the man on this stage, but my real work has been in risk assessment." Behind Marcus, the massive screen that had been displaying the Thorne Industries logo flickered. It was replaced by a stream of data, bank records from offshore accounts, encrypted ledgers, excerpts from the user data he had sold, proof, irrefutable and damning. The crowd gasped. Marcus stared at the screen, then back at her, his face ashen. "Marcus Thorne did not build a company," she continued, her eyes locked on his. "He built a criminal enterprise. He committed financial fraud, and he trafficked the private data of every single one of his users." "Lies!" Marcus shrieked, his composure shattering. "She's a scorned wife. She's crazy. Security." No security came. The security for the event was Ji-hoon's. He turned on her, his face twisted in a snarl of pure hatred. "You bitch. I'll destroy you. I'll destroy your family. Do you hear me? I will ruin you." Amara stood perfectly still. The ballroom seemed to hold its breath. She let his threats hang in the air, a testament to the man he was. Then she delivered the final, fatal blow, a mic drop of devastating simplicity. "You already tried," she said, her voice deadly quiet. She then turned her address to the stunned audience, to the investors, to the press. "Mr. Thorne's company is a hollow shell, leveraged with debt he cannot pay. As of 5 minutes ago, my consortium acquired a controlling interest in that debt. We're calling it due, effective immediately. It was over." The finality of it hung in the air. Marcus, broken, made a last desperate lunge for her, a wild animal trying to take down its hunter. Ji-hoon's men intercepted him effortlessly, their movements economical and brutal. They held him, struggling and pathetic, as the first uniformed police officers, the cleanup crew, entered the ballroom. Amara watched, her expression unreadable, as they took him away. She had not just sent evidence to the authorities. She had faced him. She had spoken the words. Her hand had been on the lever that brought his world crashing down. Justice, visceral and personal, 6 months later. The air in the boardroom in Seoul smelled of green tea, old leather, and money so old it had forgotten how to shout. Amara stood at the head of a long, polished table. speaking in fluent, formal Korean. She was walking a team of skeptical executives from a rival corporation through the finer points of a hostile takeover defense. Her arguments were sharp, her data was flawless, her confidence was absolute. She was not asking for their approval, she was commanding their respect. She was the new head of international risk for the Sun Hua Group, a position created for her, a position she had earned. After the meeting, the executives bowing respectfully as they left, she sat down, a wave of quiet satisfaction washing over her. Her phone buzzed. It was a video call from David. His face filled the screen, smiling, healthy. He was in his scrubs, the background a busy hospital ward. He was thriving, safe. "Just wanted to say hi," he said. "Nailed my pathology exam." "I never doubted it," she said, her smile genuine and warm. "I'm proud of you." The call was short, but it was everything. It was the reason, the proof of her victory. The boardroom door opened. Kwon Ji-hoon entered. He had been in Seoul for the past month, overseeing the final absorption of Marcus's dismantled assets. He wore a simple dark suit, but he moved with the same quiet authority. He didn't speak. He walked to the small tea service in the corner of the room and poured a cup of sanghwa cha, a traditional, bitter medicinal tea. Her favorite, the one she drank when she was deep in thought. He placed the cup on the table in front of her, a simple gesture, a protection moment, but not from a physical threat, a protection of her focus, of her well-being. It was their language. They sat in a comfortable silence, the quiet hum of Seoul far below. "He asked for a deal," Ji-hoon said finally, looking out the window. "He offered to give up everything in exchange for a reduced sentence." Amara took a slow sip of the tea, its bitter warmth spreading through her. She thought of the bruises, the locked door, the fear. She thought of the woman who had typed a desperate message to a wrong number. "Dignity isn't given," she said, her voice soft but unwavering. "It's taken back." Ji-hoon turned his head, his eyes meeting hers. In their dark depths, she saw not love, not passion, but something far more rare and valuable. He saw her, all of her, the strategist, the survivor, the warrior. He saw an equal, and in that mutual recognition, she found a sense of belonging she had never known. She was not in his world, or her old world. She had built her own, and she was finally, truly home. What would you do if your only way out was to trust a complete stranger? If you enjoyed Amara's journey from victim to victor, like this story, and follow for more tales of justice and earned redemption.